So it's after 7 now. So thanks everyone for joining us today. This is a brand new project I'm excited about and trying to grow this and really this is a pilot year for the project. So bear with us if we're doing things a little bit differently. Obviously this is an unusual year too. I wanted to start off a little bit for those of you who don't know me. I tend to work a lot with big lake anglers, charter captains, and we hold these regional fishery workshops a couple times a year. We get people in a room with biologists, and it's more than just one-way communication from biologists to fishermen. It's really a two-way street. So we try to engage anglers and sporting clubs and outdoor clubs in the decision-making process. And we have a lot of social science that goes along with it, polling, surveys. So it's been great. We have a really good relationship over many decades between Sea Grant and MSU Extension, who I work for, and these big lake audiences. Through Michigan Sea Grant, we really focus on Great Lakes issues, but tributaries are part of the Great Lakes fishery. You're not going to have river steelhead unless you have them eating food out in the big lakes. So personally, I just wanted to say I'm a big fisherman myself. I do fish the big lake, but also spend a lot of time in inland lakes and especially rivers. So I've just noticed over the years that we don't see as much representation from river anglers in these decision-making kinds of scenarios when it comes to the Great Lakes fishery. But again, since your steelhead fishery depends on the Great Lakes, it makes a lot of sense to start building a relationship between Sea Grant and kind of building a constituency here with river anglers. So this project isn't just about getting data from you. It's about trying to build the same kind of educational and outreach framework through extension that we have with the big lake anglers. So today's meeting, really the purpose is to take the very first step of this. So don't expect the world. Again, this is a weird year. We can't do in-person meetings for the foreseeable future through MSU Extension. So we're going to have to do it online, and this is, a good project to do that since we have a statewide project and scope here. So we're taking the first step towards really trying to build this community of educated stakeholders that'll eventually contribute to steelhead science and inform management, at a basin-wide kind of level, hopefully. But really, this is the pilot year. The idea here is just to kick off data collection in year one. Hopefully we'll get some great stuff, but again, we can't really expect the world too quick. We know from past experience that there'll probably be some bugs and bumps in the roads, but this is step one. The objectives are really to allow anglers to collect useful data on clipped and unclipped steelhead. And that's where some of the protocols I'll talk about and ways we collect data and the way we organize teams, it's really geared toward trying to provide useful data, because we know from past projects that the number one thing anglers want is good, usable data. They want to learn and they want to share that information with people. So that's the whole idea. Part of this also is keeping the details of your individual catch records confidential. So the whole Angler Diary system is built and monitored through MSU Extension. We went through a whole human research protocol to make sure that the data that you give to me, I'm not going to share your personal information with anyone else in a way that'll link your catch information to your catches or your personal information to your catches. So I'm not going to be telling people how many fish you personally catch per trip or where your favorite fishing hole is. That's not the deal. We're going to look at percent clipped and length frequency distributions, and we'll share that data, but not your individual personal data. So the idea with all of this is to provide education, both for you as anglers and education to managers who really don't have as many ways to get at this data as you might think. So we'll talk about that later. But for today, the ground rules really for this group in general are to focus on learning more about steelhead. We know we all have our favorite way of fishing and or maybe some opinions on how things should be managed or gear restrictions or catch limits and all that. But step one is to get together and grow this group and try to include all kinds of anglers, whether they're catch and keep spawn anglers or fly anglers, catch and release only. We want everyone's data because we won't learn about the whole fishery unless we're getting data from all kinds of different anglers. So for now, we're going to kind of table the contentious issues and try to focus on building this. But also, in the future, we hope that this data, this community we build, will really inform those issues, and we can have some in-depth discussions among ourselves here about what should be done based on what we find and based on what we learn about other projects that are going on now and other research in the past. So the idea is to get educated and then really dive into the management implications later on for sure. So a couple of research questions that we can probably get at with what we have pretty easily are the question of, do anglers selectively harvest clipped steelhead? That's a pretty easy one based on the fact that we'll be asking for your data on fin clipped fish and whether or not you keep or release the fish. So that's one thing we can hit at pretty easy. We can also look at which rivers have the highest proportion of unclipped fish, but these are a little bit different than the kind of higher level research questions we'd like to get at. We'd really like to know, does natural reproduction vary from year to year and even river to river? And that kind of depends on how you're interpreting your clipped fish and a variety of other things. And then why? And that's a bigger discussion as well, because you can imagine how things like water level or the availability of forage in Lake Michigan or the availability of forage in the stream or the stocking size, whether you're stocking fall fingerlings versus spraying the yearlings. There's a lot of things that can affect the wild fish and the stocked fish. And some of that will be hard to get to without a whole lot of data being collected is the bottom line. So we also would like to look at research questions for specific rivers. And these are just ideas up here for now, right? We're going to be honing the research questions as we talk individually about each river as well. And different rivers are different. Some might have different stocking histories or different creeks and feeder systems that are of particular interest that might inform these questions. So Matt's with, and Chuck for that matter, are with Fish and Wildlife Service's mass marking program. And none of this would be possible without them, because without them, there would not be so many marked fish in the system. And we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between stocked and wild. So we're going to hand it over to Matt and get a little history on the mass marking program and their foray into steelhead work. And I think I'll have to stop sharing, right, Caitlin? And then Matt can start.
All right. Oh, there we go. Can everybody see the slide okay? Looks like it. We're good? Okay. All right. So thanks for the introduction, Dan, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. As Dan mentioned, myself and Chuck are with the mass marking program with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'm just going to give a pretty quick overview today on our program, kind of who we are and what we do, and then follow that up with some very early results we have from steelhead coated wire tagging with a few select examples from other species as well. So with that, I'll get right into it with the program overview. The Great Lakes Mass Marking Program is a pretty broad collaboration among federal, state, and tribal agencies on the Great Lakes, coordinated by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And the program began in 2010. This was at the request of the state and tribal managers, and basically to touch on and address questions on survival, contribution of hatchery fish, natural reproduction, and other things for salmon and trout in the Great Lakes. We've been funded thus far from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative through the EPA. This is non-based, non-permanent funding, but they have been supportive of our program for the past decade, and we've been appreciative of that. And our program includes four main components. So we have the tagging and marking component of the hatchery fish, the recovery of those fish as adults, as well as collection of data, extracting tags and other lab processing, and then data analysis and providing support to fisheries managers in that regard. You know, I know Dan mentioned that all this fish tagging is from our program, but our program also relies on support from you, from anglers. Thanks to support from anglers like you, we have over 8 years of data on over 125,000 fish so far from open water angling, and probably another 30,000 or so from streams. So, you know, that gives us a lot of data to work with the species we've been tagging so far, which have been primarily Chinook salmon and lake trout, and should continue to give us data to work with as we now pursue questions on steelhead. So to give you kind of a brief synopsis here, all of this tagging and marking operation is possible from these automated tagging trailers. A couple of choice photos here. Basically, in these hatcheries, we're able to process these fish without them leaving the water. They can receive an adipose fin clip and a coated wire tag at a rate of 7 to 10,000 fish every hour, which is 2 to 3 fish a second. That very quick rate is what allows us to tag as many fish as we do. The coated wire tags provide information on where a fish is stocked, the year class, which gives us information on how old a fish is, and then the genetic strain as well. This began in 2010 with all lake trout being tagged annually since then. And then all Chinook salmon have either been tagged or fin clipped since 2011, and steelhead were added in 2017. All told, we do between 9 and 10 million fish annually. And I know right now we're in the midst of lake trout season at the National Fish Hatcheries. So all this tagging and marking, it provides us with a very useful tool, but it's also important to get the data on the back end as these fish as adults. And so to that end, our program also coordinates a fairly extensive field effort through which we collect tags and biodata from harvested adult fish. We employ 6 field teams every year, and they're stationed at these red stars in this map. They sample over 40 port cities a year. Those are these blue circles you see in Lake Michigan and the U.S. waters of Lake Huron, covering between 300 and 450 sampling days per year collectively. Between 10 and 22,000 fish are examined each year, and this survey is the most abundant source of samples for all species but lake trout. All salmon and trout species but lake trout in these systems. So to that end, once we get these tags, we don't get tags from all the fish because not all the fish are tagged. Some of them are wild, and we'll get more into that in a slide or two. But for those that do have tags, the fish do need to be sacrificed to retrieve those tags. However, we collect these fish from anglers at cleaning stations and at tournaments, and these are being harvested for their flesh anyway. And so we do get the tag information. Extracting the tags isn't nearly as easy as putting them in the fish, though. They have to be taken out by hand. We've recovered about 111,000 tags so far through 2020, and you can kind of see these tags are a fraction of an inch long. You can see one blown up on the scope here with the number that indicates the group of fish that particular individual belonged to. With regards to wild fish, we also collect structures, scales, otoliths, which are an ear bone, and maxilla. These are all structures that lay down calcium, and in the wintertime, they lay down calcium much slower than in the summer. This creates these kind of annuli, these circles that we can use to interpret and estimate the age of wild fish. So that's a lot of what we do in the lab. And then for this fourth component of the program with data analysis, the coated wire tags in and of themselves have helped answer lots of questions about wild recruitment and movement patterns, as well as survival and growth rates for Chinook salmon and lake trout, and soon for steelhead. For example, the data are used in stock assessment models and the predator-prey balance models that the states use to help make some of their decisions. And then because we get our hands on all of these salmon and trout, we've been able to leverage that field survey to contribute in other areas, including the diets of salmon and trout, sea lamprey wounding on the different species. I can tell you for steelhead, their wounding rates were lower than the other salmon and trout species, at least in Lake Michigan. And with regards to steelhead diets, they appear to be more adaptive to changes in the fishery than, say, a Chinook, which is more reliant on alewife. Those are some of the species-specific things we've learned from these efforts. We're also engaged in several collaborations to look at the natal origin of wild fish. This technique called otolith microchemistry allows us to estimate or determine where a wild fish came from, what river system it came from, by looking at trace elements in the system and comparing those to trace elements that are trapped in the ear bone of the fish. And we are doing that for steelhead as well as Chinook salmon. On top of that, we've been engaged in looking at genetic composition of wild lake trout, mercury biocontamination, and effects of sea lamprey attacks on host conditions. So not to go through these so quickly, but just to give you a flavor of all the different research efforts the program's involved with, it's really been a cool opportunity to be at the nexus of all this information and work on this program for Great Lakes fisheries. And so with that, I do want to share some of the results we have from steelhead and from some other species. very briefly. But I do want to note, if you go to YouTube and you're interested in more details, if you YouTube search Southern Lake Michigan Fishery Workshop, that will bring up the workshop from this past April that Dan and Michigan Sea Grant hosted. There's a nice talk on there about diets of salmon and trout, and then I'm also giving a talk on that with a lot more detail on what we've learned from Chinook and lake trout. So one of our two core questions that we're going to be talking about today is looking at wild recruitment. This image kind of shows how we make that determination based on a fin clip. The hatchery salmon on the top has that adipose fin removed. The wild fish has that adipose fin intact, and that's the lower of the two images. All of our fish, we do pretty rigorous quality assurance in the hatcheries. We check them every 2 hours and measure between 1 and 200 fish, looking at clip success rates, and only 0.5% of fish coming out of the hatchery are not clipped due to error. We did do a focal study on Chinook salmon, I think 2 seasons ago, to try to see if there was any evidence of fin regeneration, and we didn't find any evidence of fin regeneration. So our estimates are that 99.5% of unclipped fish in the system are wild. And so this allows us to really do some interesting things. So I'm giving you an example first here of Chinook salmon. We've been able to do this every year since 2011. This is the latest data from 2019 showing differences in the percent wild across the Lake Michigan and Huron. Overall, we're looking at about 2/3 of the Chinook salmon population in Lake Michigan being wild at this point. And when we know how many, when we can estimate with this percentage, we can then take how many fish we know are stocked and estimate how many wild fish are coming out every year class. So this is a figure showing the estimated number of Chinook salmon smolts in millions. You have your stocked smolts in orange, that's a known quantity, and the blue smolts in blue, that's our estimation. And we do hope to do something similar for steelhead. This provides the managers with a real solid idea of just how many fish are out there so they can continue to manage for a healthy fishery. So just for this latest year class, the 2018 year class, we estimated just shy of 2 million Chinook salmon that were wild for a total of over 4 million in the system from that year class. So with regards to steelhead, we don't have any results from the fin clip or tagging effort yet on their wild recruitment. Thus far, you know, with the tagging starting in 2017, these fish are first available to the fishery at age 2. That would have been last year. And they're most available at older ages. So we should have adequate data to look at this with our tags and clips after next year's field collections. However, this partnership we have using this otolith microchemistry technique, they've been able to look at estimates of wild origin, and they're coming up with estimates of 30 to 50% of the steelhead in Lake Michigan being wild. There's a little more uncertainty with that than when you're looking at marked fish, so we should be able to get a more precise estimate. But just to show you these data, these came from Ben Breaker, who's photographed here with a collaboration with Central Michigan University and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. These 3 figures are collections in 2016, 17, and 18, and those red bars are hatchery, those blue bars are wild, and each column is a different region of the lake. And you can see the percentage of wild fish is mostly between 30 and 50 for most of these areas. Some intriguing results there for wild recruitment of steelhead, and something we should be able to get a more precise handle on with the fin clips after next year. Another core question is looking at movement. Movement among different regions is important for understanding and assessing fishery stocks. And with steelhead, we actually are able to get a sense of this from our collections in 2019. So I'm just highlighting one example. This table is showing the number of coated wire steelhead we recovered from the 2017 year class last year. The bolded region, WM4, that's an area of Wisconsin around Sheboygan, Manitowoc area. It's like central Wisconsin shoreline. And we recovered 74 fish there. So that gives us the highest confidence we can from this particular data set to look at movement. And so what we're looking at here is all of the steelhead that were recovered in this region of Lake Michigan. What percentage of those 74 fish came from different stocking areas. And as it turns out, only 10% of those fish were actually stocked in Wisconsin. Another 10% were stocked in Illinois, and then about 40% each were stocked in Indiana and Michigan. So this implies a mixed population with lots of movement throughout Lake Michigan, and that's actually very similar to what we've seen year after year after year for Chinook salmon. A different way of looking at these data more spatially. So this map is showing the same data from that pie chart. This yellow highlighted region, that's the area of the lake we're talking about in WM4. So every single fish was landed in that yellow region. And then these pink circles are representing where those fish were stocked, with larger circles indicating a larger number of fish being recovered in that Wisconsin region. And so we can see just from looking at this map that they are in fact coming from all over the lake. So another thing we hope to be able to do with steelhead is look at relative survival and look at factors like genetic strain and stocking location. Thus far, we've found this positive relationship between relative survival and total length at stocking. And at this point, we're treating this more of a confounding effect. If you look at this total length at stocking in inches, there's a fairly large variability among the states between 4 and 8 inches. And you have to remember, we're looking at a data collection of fish at age 2. It's quite possible these fish that were stocked at shorter lengths just weren't available and being kept by anglers yet. They were still too small. So we were hoping to get more information on this year. Unfortunately, COVID had other plans for us, but next year we should be able to do a more rigorous analysis looking at what's affecting steelhead survival. So just to recap what we found for steelhead so far, the population appears to be mixed in the summertime. The stocking location at this point, it doesn't look like it's affecting the recovery location, except we're assuming during spawning. We know the Chinook salmon return to where they're stocked to spawn. We assume something similar is happening with steelhead. Based on the microchemistry work that Central Michigan is leading, right now we're ballparking about 30 to 50% of the steelhead being of wild origin. And more data is needed then to look at effects on relative survival and to get a more precise estimate of wild recruitment. So the last slide I have for you today is just kind of talking about differences between open water and stream recoveries. So our program focuses on the open water results. With our current personnel and funding constraints, that's where we're able to put our focus. And from the open water, because the population is mixed, we can get at lake-wide questions. And that helps inform lake-wide management, which is where the level at which a lot of management decisions are made for the fishery. Also, most open water anglers, they're harvesting what they catch, so that is an easy facilitation for tag recoveries. However, with these stream results, we can get at some questions we wouldn't be able to get at from the open water results, specifically looking at stream specific questions. So for example, what is the return rate to each stream? That would require collections from streams to get at. If we just look at the fin clip rates in stream data, we'd be able to look at the percent wild in each of these streams, and that would help corroborate some of these microchemistry results on the natal origin of fish. You know, which of these streams in a given watershed are producing the most of these wild steelhead. And then finally, if we were able to get tags out of these streams, we could start looking at things like straying rates. How many fish in any particular river were stocked in other rivers versus those that are returning to where they were stocked. So those are some of the things we can get at from stream results from this volunteer program, and something we're looking forward to in the coming years. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your attention, and thank all the anglers and committees and technicians who helped assist with the data collection for this. Dan, I don't know if we have a minute or two for questions, but happy to entertain.
Yeah, I expect we're not going to adhere perfectly to the agenda today and keep this conversational. So by all means, if people have questions, shoot.
Hey, Dan, before we get into the questions, I just wanted to add one thing. Nice presentation, Matt. Before we started tagging fish, just so everybody knows, we sat down individually with each state and asked them what their information needs were. And basically we had a one-on-one discussion with each state. A lot of states overlapped. Certainly wild recruitment was top on the list. The tagging designs that we use when we're tagging the fish, what groups of fish to tag, those are pretty much set by the states. And we basically just review their requests for the tagging lots based on our statistical review of whether we would get the answers they're looking for. And then we counsel them on any changes. But this is totally driven by the state's information needs.
So that's a good point, and anglers should understand that these coded wire tags come in huge batches that go to certain lots of fish. So I don't know if Chuck, you or Matt can speak to some of the batches that are out there. I mean, we can't have anglers expecting that we can tell exactly which river their fish was stocked in, right?
Yeah. So most of that depends on, you know, the finer detail of the questions, like if you're stocking 11 streams and you're only stocking so many fish, you know, you have to have a certain number of animals out there that are tagged to get some sort of confidence in the data that you're analyzing on the returns. So Matt figures out that threshold, and you know, so you can't really like tag a lot of 5,000 fish of steelhead and expect to get any meaningful data back at all with any confidence or statistical confidence. So right now, I think in Lake Michigan, I'm trying to think of how many batches we got out there across all the states. I wish I had that in front of me, but I think it's about 20, I don't know, 18 to 22 different batches, maybe a few more. For lake trout, we ask a lot of different questions, and we got 57 different lots across Michigan and Huron. With Chinook, it's about the same as with steelhead, but I wish I had those numbers in front of me, but I don't. But the point here I'm trying to make is that's driven by the state's information needs and what they want to do.
Anyone else have additional questions for Matt or Chuck? I'd like to call out Ed Blissick too from GLSI and mention that we don't really have any U.S. Fish and Wildlife biotechs, headhunters, or creel clerks from DNR taking heads on these streams. So it's really up to you and other anglers on rivers if we're going to get any head collections and coded wire tag recoveries on streams. And Ed's group, GLSI, if you're here to make a plug, Ed, you unmuted?
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, we're excited to help. We created a reward program with co-sponsored by Captain Chuck's and Moonshine Spoons, and we've got $3,300 rewards. That's either Captain Chuck gift certificates or Moonshine Spoon packages, and they'll be randomly drawn from all the heads turned in for Chinook and steelhead. We didn't include lake trout on that. As you know, our organization's very much about salmon. But we really want to help the steelhead program. And so I know a lot of anglers like to catch and release steelhead. I know I do pretty much through the winter months, but if I'm going to keep one, it's going to be one with a tag and turn that head in. And for every head you turn in, you get in the drawing for those prizes. So the more heads you turn in, the more chances for the prize packs. And those will be awarded probably sometime late winter after all this season's heads are processed. So it's important that when you turn a head in, turn a tag slip in with it. You can get those online, and you know, maybe Dan, if you put the video out, you can put a link to those tag slips. You put the head in a Ziploc bag, put the tag in a smaller Ziploc bag, and put it in with the head and freeze it and turn it in. And then that's where we'll get your name. The DNR is going to conduct the drawing, and then they'll give us the names and addresses, and we'll ship out the rewards. You know, I'm hopeful maybe we can announce it at the Sea Grant in the winter. But as soon as, you know, the head processing is done, we'll have the drawing and get out the rewards. And we hope to continue that next year. So I guess one key for the anglers is if you're catching some fish this fall or early winter, you know, get the heads in as soon as you can to get them in this year's lot. But I expect we'll do it again next year. So for those spring fish getting turned in, they'll go into next year's drawing.
Great.
So I got a question. So even if anglers aren't sacrificing fish, if they're releasing everything, you know, just keeping track of the lengths and whether it's got an adipose clip or not is really valuable. So granted, it'd be great to get the snout with the tag in it for the hatchery fish, but for those that want to release everything, there's still valuable data in keeping track of who's got a fin clip and who doesn't.
So thanks, Chuck. That is the perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about. So Matt, if you can stop your screen sharing, I'll take it.
You got it. Let's see.
I'm going to pour myself another glass of wine.
Can I ask one question too? This is Jay Anglin. When I'm guiding on the river, especially during salmon season, it's pretty common to find dead fish, whether they just were from angler, handling, or just deceased from whatever. Occasionally you see one that's clipped. Does it make sense I'm sure my clients will be tickled pink for me to hack the head off of a dead salmon and shove it in the cooler, but is that something that we should consider doing as well? Because it comes from the same stream, it's the same data, isn't it?
So you're asking about dead salmon?
Yeah, like if I'm going down the river with clients, I look over and I see a dead steelhead. I'm sorry, steelhead. If I see a dead, it's common to see salmon that are clipped that are dead.
Absolutely.
But and I guess I could still turn those in too. I never really thought about it. But for this particular situation, we're talking steelhead. If I see a dead steelhead that's clipped, does it make sense for a guy to hack its head off and turn that in as well? I mean, anything that's clipped, right?
Yeah, if you get a length, then you get the head. I think we're good with that. Sure.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry to conflate salmon and steelhead. Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry about the shadocks. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah, good question. So as Chuck mentioned, it's still useful to take data on clipped versus unclipped fish and look at the lengths, no matter if you're keeping fish or releasing them. There's a distinction between the Fish and Wildlife Service, their code wire tag extraction, and what Ed's group, GLSI, is supporting with the head collection rewards. There's a distinction between that program and then what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the day, which is the Great Lakes Angler Diary, which is trying to use the mass marking effort, as a way to help anglers get additional data that doesn't require any kind of tag extraction. So the program that you all registered for today is complimentary, but it's not the same as all of that. So we have a YouTube video up. It's named GL Angler Diary Overview. If you type that into YouTube, and Caitlin will put a link there in the chat. And this today, some of you might have watched this, and even if you didn't, if you can help share it, that is the big push today, because this lays out what the program is in a few minutes. I'm not going to share it today because sometimes people have issues sharing YouTube videos with limited bandwidth anyway, but share that and check out this Great Lakes Angler Diary resource page. This is the resource page on the Michigan Sea Grant website. Again, here's the short URL for it, but it has all the videos. It has all the instructions. It has links that you can go to register and start entering data. And as things become available, we'll put additional results up here. So the idea is to keep this out there, get it linked in your browser, bookmark it, and again, share it to promote the other people jumping on board, because we're really not going to be able to get much information unless we get a lot of people submitting data on a lot of fish, in which case we can do some really neat things with it. So we want to message very clearly and concisely on this. So we came up with this 4-step, real basic instructions. Register at glanglerdiary.org or download the iOS app. Record data from every steelhead trip, October through May. Measure each and every steelhead caught, and then check for fin clips and other marks. So hopefully that's something that sounds simple. So when people see this on a sign or online, they say, that doesn't sound too bad, I can handle that. And obviously there's some caveats and additional things. When you're recording data for trips, we're asking for the number of anglers in your party and the number of hours you fish. So if you're only recording data on what you personally caught, the angler number would be 1. If you're recording data on 4 people who fished with you, then put that down. So that's one thing. Another thing, when we ask for measurements, we ask for measurements to the nearest 1/4 inch. However, it's come to our attention, obviously, this is a little different. Not everyone can measure a fish on a measuring board on a boat or anything. If you're wading, especially if you're alone, it can be pretty difficult to get a measurement to the 1/4 inch. So we'll also accept measurements to the nearest inch. But if you are wading, if you're having trouble and you're trying to release your fish and measure them quickly, like a cloth measuring tape works well, one of the retractable ones. Obviously, you're not going to carry a measuring board with you if you're wading. So make do with what you can, but put a good faith effort into trying to get the most accurate possible measurement, because that is important. And then when you check for fin clips and other marks, make sure you check all the fins and even the maxillae, the upper jaw bones. Probably not going to see a lot of maxilla clips because those are used in Wisconsin, but it's something to be aware of. And then the other thing is we will have a short survey that goes out at the end of the year. Again, this is really important for our quality control and our compliance with human subjects research guidelines. So we're conducting all this data collection, but at the end of the year, we have to ask you if your data are complete and if you consent to sharing that data with us so that we can take it, analyze it, and share it with other people in a way that won't identify you as the source of your data. So we have to go through all this, which means we're not going to have results until after the end of the season. But the advantage is it's really going to help us with quality control. And we've done this before with other fisheries, and there are some data sets we don't use. If the data are inconsistent and people say, you know, I kind of forgot to record a few trips, then we don't use the data. We really want it to be good, high quality information. So the video, the GL Angler Diary overview that I mentioned goes through this data entry on iOS devices. I wanted to share some screenshots because we're constantly trying to improve this. It's been a few years, and we'll talk with the developers in a second here. But I wanted to point out some things we caught just today. When you're doing your entry, this is the data entry screen for Apple devices. It's pretty simple. It's all in one place. We've really worked to try to make this very user-friendly. You put your trip information in, and then you hit the add button to add individual fish. It'll take you through these scrolling menus. Just scroll up and down, select the fish, species, the length, the fate, whether you released or kept it, the sex of the fish. If you don't know, if it's a small fish, you can't tell male, female, but not assessed, and then the fin clips. So it's all right there. And one issue came up because if you have a trip where you caught 0 fish, then we still want you to collect data on that trip. It's important because we may be able to say things about broad trends in angler catch and effort. And again, Creel census clerks aren't on these rivers. So this could prove useful if we get enough people using it. So thing is, there's a little trick to adding a trip with 0 fish caught. When you generate your trip information, you still have to hit add as if you were going to add a fish. And once you do that, it'll bring up this menu and ask you what species, but you're gonna hit cancel. If you happen to get skunked for the day, just go into this menu, hit add, then cancel, then you'll get back to this screen, hit your back button, and it will add your trip in. And you'll see that it'll record it as fish measured for this trip equals 0. So that's the correct way to do it. The video was a little off on the instructions, and so we want to make sure everyone's aware of that. We do want your trips recorded even if you catch 0 fish, and that's how to do it with the iOS app. Also, I noticed that several people who did already register had home waters that didn't really make sense. Some people put like Copper Harbor or a port like Saugatuck, and you may not have been aware that all of the rivers are listed farther down. You just have to scroll through all the lake ports because we have people using this on the Big Lake too. So if you want to change your home water, and you should, if you're a river fisherman and you didn't enter a river, you want to hit the little menu icon to the left, and then it'll bring up your profile option. You'll go to your profile screen and it'll show your home water. You can change it right there and pick whichever river you fish most often. This is gonna save you a lot of time because every time you enter a new trip, it will automatically start at your home water. So you won't have to scroll through that huge menu every time you take a trip. It'll put you right where you're at. Now, if you don't have an iOS device, you can still enter data at the glanglerdiary.org site. And you can also add a lot of bells and whistles. You can do a lot more with this. So if you want to access the data that you entered on your Apple device, you can always go into here and add details about the bait you used, about how deep you were fishing, anything you want. There's a lot more options. But the thing I really want to point out is if you're using this system, it's a little different. You see the add trip button there. You have your list of trips. It's pretty much the same, but the procedure for adding individual fish is different, and that's tripped a few people up in the past. You have to go to the individual trip that you want, find that row, and then click add fish on the row that you want to add to that trip. I have that all spelled out too in a GL Angler Diary data entry tutorial. It's about 10 minutes long on YouTube. And again, we don't have to go through all the bells and whistles on it, but the thing is, it has this optional trip information drop-down menu where there's a bunch of different stuff. You can even enter your lamprey wounds and all kinds of stuff. But when you add a trip, if you clicked on other location or other Lake Michigan tributary in this example, you can always write in by hand the actual location you fished, so that I know what it is when I get your data. You'll notice there are a lot of small tributaries that are missing. You couldn't add every little creek that gets a steelhead run. It's just too much. But if you want to provide us with that information, you have to go into the website and do that manually. So with that, I think we'll switch over to Brian Brenton and Sue Laud with Brenton Consulting. They're the ones who developed this whole system. So I think they're not going to be screen sharing. So Brian, if you just want to hop in and unmute, let's hear about the development of this.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank the Detroit Steelheaders for providing the funding for this. They've provided the initial funding when it was Salmon Ambassadors, and they provided the funding to rework it several times to make it easier, simpler to use, and now be geared, at least the phone app, to river fishermen, with the understanding that that's probably one of the most difficult places to try and punch data into a phone when you're trying not to drop the fish and or drop your phone in the drink. The reason I became involved in this is that I'm a lifelong steelhead and salmon fisherman, and happened to cross Dan several years ago when I signed up for the Salmon Ambassadors program, and suggested that perhaps it'd be easier to have people enter their data directly, as opposed to trying to keep track of things on paper and send all that in and have to have it processed. And so I volunteered. I have a small consulting company that does different application work and fisheries models, and it said that we would do this well below our cost to get something put together and as a prototype, and then work towards an application with broader usage, which I think is where we're at now. It's certainly not perfect, but I think this current iteration of it is very simple to use. It's pretty robust. It resides on your phone, so you can use it without having connectivity with your phone to the network. And we're hoping that the simplicity of that is going to encourage a lot more people to use it. So as Dan pointed out earlier, the big thing here is that doesn't cost anything, and is if you can tell your friends to use it, the more folks we can get using it, the better data set that we're going to have at the end. I don't know that anybody wants to hear about any of the technology behind it. If anybody has any specific technical questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Well, one question that probably could come up, when are we going to have an Android version? And we're hoping that we'll have an Android version for next year. So as of now, there's the iOS for Apple phones, and folks can use the website. You can also use the website through the browser on your phone, but I will be the first to admit that that is not particularly user-friendly, trying to do it on a small screen like that. But it is certainly possible if you have an Android phone and you really want to do it on your phone.
Thanks, Brian, and really they've really volunteered a lot of their time and energy to this. So it's been funded through Detroit area steelheaders. We had small grants through MSU Extension and Michigan Sea Grant. But we also hope that maybe down the road, as this takes off, we can get some larger grants and really support it in the way that it should be supported, because now we're just back and forth, almost every week or two with something that has to be worked out. And Brian and Sue Laud, who's also on the call, have been great with all of that, very responsive and really integral to this. So if you do have any questions that you email me with, I'll be emailing Sue and Brian right away, and they're the ones who actually take care of this. So thanks. Any other questions on the technical stuff? All right, I'll go back to sharing my screen for a minute. And Brian mentioned that he was a volunteer for us at first for the Salmon Ambassadors program, which we really tried to develop with a lot of input from DNR and sport fishing groups like the Steelheaders. And the first message we got was keep it simple. Ask people for something simple and you'll be way more effective at getting people to jump on. So we kept it simple. We said, keep it to 3 simple steps, measure the length, check for the fin clip. And by the way, someone just had a question. The length is the total length, not the fork length. So you want to stretch that tail as much as you can. Check for the fin clip, record catch info. And as a result, we did get almost 200 anglers registered for this program from 2013 to 2018. And we had data on over 10,000 salmon. That's from usable, good data sets too. We had a few more that we had to call out the quality control. So it was a pretty big impact, I thought, for the amount of effort we put in. And one of the things we learned was it was good that we had a pilot year in 2013. Similar to with the steelhead, the mass marking of Chinooks was just coming online in 2013, and we didn't have all the fish in the lake marked yet because of the longevity of the fish. So we only had 8 people who wound up participating, but they returned data on over 1,000 fish. So we thought, wow, we're going to ramp this up and we're going to have data on tens of thousands of fish. And if you're familiar with what happened with the Chinook fishery after that, catch rates started going down. So we really upped our participation. In 2014, we had 71 people return data, and we did have more salmon reported too, but not quite as many as we would have hoped based on catch rates the year before. So we peaked out at 3,460 fish collected in 2014. And then you can see, we gained some more participants in 2015, but the total number of unique volunteers, the people who signed up every year, really started to drop off after that. So we kind of expect the same thing with this. And we've seen this with a lot of other citizen science projects that have been written up in the literature. You get a good head of steam going, and keeping people involved is difficult. There's going to be a lot of excitement at first, but we can't expect this to last forever either. So one of the things that we gave people every year, we circled back in those fishery workshops, and I went to a lot of club meetings, a lot of steelheaders meetings locally. I travel around West Michigan and Detroit area and Northeast and get back to the clubs whose volunteers were really doing this data collection. So we tried, again, kept it simple, percent wild at different areas around the state, something people could readily understand. It was easy to interpret because by this time in 2016, as Matt said, their error rate is extremely low on this marking. So basically, if it's a clipped fish, it's stocked. If it's not a clipped fish, it's wild. It's easy to interpret. And people could see how even from year to year, areas like Ludington and Manistee were really higher than places like southern Wisconsin because those areas were getting an influx of wild salmon that were running to rivers like the Manistee and the Pere Marquette. So it was interesting to see how things changed. However, take a look at the ends. That's the number of fish collected in each port or each area. We wound up having to pool some of these areas because we got a lot of volunteers, for example, in Pentwater and in Ludington, but we didn't have enough in either port to really have it stand alone. So we had to wind up combining them. In some areas like Southwest Michigan, we thought we'd have a whole lot of fish coming in. We got a lot of people volunteered, but then some of them just didn't wind up catching as many fish, or they sold their boat or whatever. So you couldn't really predict easily where you were going to get really good returns from year to year. And that's just the nature of this kind of volunteer program, I think. So one of the things we did, again, with the Salmon Ambassadors is it was easy to interpret. So we knew we could tell people, we're looking at percent wild. It's the number of fish that, it's the percentage of fish that are clipped. It's not going to be the same way for steelhead this year in particular. So I put together an article on this, and it's at the link up there. When we interpret the data we get from this year, there's going to be a lot of caveats. And the biggest reason is that in most years, on average, the run in any given river is about 90% comprised of age 2 and 3 fish. And this is lake age 2 and 3 fish. So steelhead who have spent 2 to 3 years in the big lake feeding, 2 to 3 summers, right? If they run in the fall. So also in general, only 1% or less of steelhead return at lake age 5. So once we know that all the fish are, lake age 5 that have been coated wire tagged and stocked, adipose fin clipped, then we can feel pretty confident that we're not missing many. But in some rivers, again, according to research done in the 80s in the St. Joe River, you can have up to 10 to 20% of your steelhead run in any given river in any given year made up of these age 4 fish. So if you have a high percentage of lake age 4 fish and you don't really know because at this point they're not clipped, then it's going to influence how you interpret your results. So thanks to the mass marking program, now all spring yearlings since 2018 have the adipose fin clip and coat of wire tag. But this means that in 2017, there were a lot of fish being stocked that did not have the adipose fin clip. And those fish are still in the system, and they'll be returning this fall or next spring as lake age 4 fish. So we know that there's that percentage of stocked fish out there that are old that we really aren't going to be able to tell if they're stocked or not. And there is a lot of overlap with the lengths. So just because a fish is really large doesn't necessarily mean it's age 4. It's a better bet, but we don't really have a great way to parse that out. Also, with steelhead, there's the issue of different mark combinations being used by different agencies. So whereas with the kings, everything had either an adipose fin clip or no fin clip. With the steelhead, there's some different strains out there, and there are different agencies using different strains of fish and different marking combinations. So the article goes into a lot more detail on this, but in Michigan waters, probably the most likely combo clip you'll find is the adipose and right ventral fin combination, which was used in 2018 and 2019 on Manistee River Skamania that were stocked. So you can pick these fish out pretty easy. Unfortunately, the Indiana Skamania that were stocked in those years had the ad clip, but not the right ventral clip. So you can't necessarily say if it doesn't have that right ventral clip, then it's not a Skamania. So just to be aware of that. And also some Wisconsin streams were stocked with Ganaraska strain steelhead who had the adipose and right ventral clip. So again, those fish probably aren't going to be returning in big numbers to Michigan rivers, but it's something to be aware of that just complicates the interpretation a little bit. Does anyone, I was on another call earlier this week and some people jumped in with some good little caveats to this. So I just want to pause if anyone in the management realm wants to clarify anything. One thing that came up is the Skamania do have a coat of wire tag, obviously, as well. So all those marks are in addition to the coat of wire tag. Also, fall fingerlings are still being stocked in the Manistee and the St. Joseph River. So those fish were fin clipped and coat of wire tagged as well. However, in some basins, I believe in Lake Superior, the fall fingerlings that were stocked recently did not necessarily have the adipose fin clip and coat of wire tag. So another question to address based on the Salmon Ambassadors data is why do we measure every fish? So we're asking for fin clip data. That's pretty straightforward. You look at percent wild, right? Well, it's also important to measure the fish. So if you orient yourself to this graph here, we have total lengths along the bottom. Just, we had fish as little as 9 inches long up to 46 inches long in this year. And these are all Chinooks caught in Lake Michigan. And you can see that there's an area of this graph here that are 20-inch fish and less. And that corresponded pretty well to the 2013 year class of king salmon. And then you got into this 20 to 30 inch range, which were mostly older fish, age 2 at that point, so 2014 year class. And you can see we have the stocked fish and the wild fish. And here's where it's so important that we have large numbers of fish to fill out graphs like this, the length frequency distributions. Here's everything we had from 2014. And if you look at what happened in 2015, you see a big difference in the shape of the graph, right? You're seeing that 2013 year class recruit into this 20 to 30 inch range. And you see that those bars are way down. So this was the way that we could link the age of the fish to our results. We have to have that length information. We can't tell you definitively with most fish if a fish of this length is exactly this age. But when you look at the distribution with lots of fish, you can be pretty sure that what you're seeing here is the lack of recruitment moving forward because of this weak 2013 year class. Now, 2013, if you remember, salmon stocking was cut pretty dramatically, 50 to 60% in that range. But you can see the wild fish bars actually declined even more. And based on the work done by Chuck and Matt, the wild reproduction dropped by about 80%, while the stocking dropped in that 50-60% range. So it was interesting that we could pick this up with our data, and we really needed that length data to do it. So that's why we're asking everyone to measure every single fish, because we won't be able to tell you anything about what's going on from one year to the next without it. So lessons learned from the salmon ambassadors, basically simple instructions and interpretation were the key. Some ports really fell short of the target, and we're talking about stream teams next here. We know that we're probably not going to have huge numbers of returns from every single river. We're going to try to do our best, but just the nature of this kind of project is we'll probably get some that really take off and some others that may not. And that will influence our ability to really make conclusions about some rivers. It's also hard to sustain effort for more than a couple of years. So what we're hoping to do here is really build this community, and with webinars like this and additional programming, hopefully keep people engaged and excited about participating. And now we'll go around and kind of introduce what we have so far for our stream teams. The idea here, again, is to focus efforts on systems that have a high fishing effort, so we know there's a big volunteer base to draw from, and a mix of stocked and wild fish. And that's not written in stone. You know, if we get a bunch of volunteers on one small creek that has all wild fish and everyone's excited and we're going to have hundreds of fish being reported a year, that's great. But we figured that we'd focus first on trying to stimulate participation in some of these bigger rivers. So the team goal, again, we'd really like to have dozens of volunteers on a given team and hundreds of fish coming in per year, because then we know we can make good conclusions about percent wild, and we can make nice length frequency graphs that cover, you know, all different age classes of fish. So the way these are structured, we have an agency partner, DNR biologist, to kind of steer research questions and inform how we run the project on individual rivers, and also to educate and tell people about past work they've done on the river and with Steelhead, and to promote the project. You know, the agency partners are going to be really important in shopping this around to local clubs and reminding people on the stream, you know, that this exists. And then we have a team leader, an influential local angler, to basically do the same kinds of things. We expect the anglers to participate in kind of steering the research questions as well, and working towards educating and promoting the project, and helping me to figure out what kind of products I can put out there educationally and training wise to do that best. And then anyone else, any other team members, if you're on the call, we're going to go around from stream to stream now, and we'll introduce an agency partner and team leader where we have them. And after that, we'll give a second, and anyone else can just chime in. If you happen to fish, you know, if we talk about the Grand River and you fish the Grand River, chime in, let us know who you are. We'll do a little bit of introduction on a stream by stream basis as we go. So I think the first stream team we have up is the Betsy River, and Heather Hedinger with MDNR is going to be our agency partner. So Heather, I believe you have a screen sharing, right?
Yeah, yep. I'll go ahead and share what I've got. I just have a couple of quick slides to go through here. Okay. So as Dan mentioned, I am the DNR fish biologist up here in the Traverse City region. I cover the Betsy, the Platte, the Boardman, the Boyne, the Jordan, the Bear, and all the tiny steelhead streams in between. So I'm going to be the agency partner for the Betsy River. So I'm just going to do a couple quick history slides here on the Betsy. So we know that stocking is really important on the Betsy. Hydrologically speaking, the Betsy is not a great trout type stream. It cools down very quickly in the fall, warms up very quickly in the spring, has very few tributaries, not much for groundwater input. So the natural recruitment, we do have some natural recruitment. We've been able to document that. It's just not quite enough to really keep up with the angler demands and fishing pressure that we see on this system. It's a hugely popular system for up here. Most of my rivers are pretty small in this area. The Betsy is the biggest one that I've got, really, so it does attract a lot of folks. Our stocking program here actually occurred as early as 1909, very inconsistently in the early 1900s, and then it was relatively consistent since the 1960s. We had two sources of steelhead stocking here in the system. Prior to 1991, everything was state hatcheries, of course. But in 1991, we started a co-op project with the Manistee County Sport Fishing Association and the Benzie County Fishing Association to rear fish at the Orsini Hatchery, which is a private hatchery here in Manistee County. We raised fish there from 1991 to 2009. After 2007, we started using fish from the Wolf Lake State Fish Hatchery. We actually were involved in a paired study where we clipped fish and looked at survival from fish from both of those hatcheries, and figured out that our fish from the Orsini hatchery, while it was a great effort, they were a little bit smaller than what we really needed them to be to smolt out. And so after that, we were able to convert to exclusively stocking state fish. So through the course of time, stocking's been a little bit variable, and we've received anywhere from 15 to 50,000 spring fingerlings every year. Now that we're using exclusively state-raised fish, that prescription is a pretty consistent 20,000 every year. So we've done a fair amount of studies here on the Betsy. We have a relatively frequent survey station at Curick Road, which, if you're familiar with the Betsy, is in about the middle of the watershed. And we use that site to evaluate natural reproduction on steelhead, as well as survival of stocked brown trout. And I mentioned we did that paired comparison study with the Orsini fish versus fish raised at Wolf Lake. We've also done a DNR-based creel, and some of you might remember some voluntary creel that Mark Tonello conducted on the Betsy. You'll see there's a gray paper, a fisheries report that came of that data. And that was that effort really was pretty cool. It's about this. It's along the same lines as this program that MSU is putting forth. Mark was able to put it together starting in 2006 and running till about 2010. I was able to participate and collect data on behalf of DNR while I was a creel clerk. It's a really cool project. We had a ton of angler effort, so I'm pretty excited that our Betsy River anglers are going to share that enthusiasm again this time around and participate pretty actively. So based on that study, again, we know that we do have some natural reproduction. The Betsy, it did take a bump in the early 2000s. So in our study, we actually had about 69.2% wild fish. That does seem to fluctuate pretty heavily though. 15% of our fish came from that Orsini hatchery contribution. Again, they were just a little on the small side and didn't contribute quite as well as we had really wanted them to. And then during that 2009-2010 run, when we were really able to do a lot of data collection, 23.9% of our fish actually came from Wolf Lake Hatchery. Wolf Lake produces some really nice fish, so that's not entirely surprising. But we'd really like to know, have these trends continued on the Betsy? What's the variability look like? So all things we're trying to get at. So again, those are the streams that I manage. We do have some of those available in the reporting tool. So if you have questions on access, fishing, stocking, any of those things, there's my contact information, and feel free to reach out.
Great, thanks, Heather. I know Fritz Heller has stepped up to be the team leader, but he wasn't able to join us today. It was last minute we contacted him. And do we have anyone else on from the Betsy who'd like to chime in? Doesn't sound like it. But I know we've got a couple people enrolled for the app that are definitely Betsy River fishermen. So let's see if I can switch back my screen sharing here. And for the Pere Marquette River and also for the Manistee and Muskegon, I'll mention Mark Tonello offered to be the agency lead, and Mark wasn't able to join us today for a scheduled conflict as well. So I figured I'd chime in a little bit on the Pere Marquette to fill in. The way we structure this is a little different. The Betsy River, we have one data entry category on our menu, a drop-down menu for the Great Lakes Angler Diary. It just says Betsy River. We have a few different options for the PM system. And it's based on the river fisheries and stocking history. So one area is the lower river between Indian Bridge and the lower PM. Here we have fish coming upstream that may go either to the upper Pere Marquette River proper, which we have entered into the app as PM River above Indian Bridge. If you select that, it'll display as upper PM for your individual trip. So the upper PM, most people are probably aware is mostly a wild fishery. We think that it's by and large driven entirely by wild reproduced fish. However, we may get some strays because the big South Branch is stocked in most years. Most years it gets about 10 to 11,000 fish. So in 2017, 11,000 fish were stocked with no marks. And again, these fish may still be returning as age 4 fish from the lake. In 2018, it got 10,475 with the adipose fin and the coda wire tag. And again, in 2020, it got 10,901 fish. Although, according to the stocking records I found, 2019 was not stocked at all. Also, the lower PM at Scottville was stocked with a small plant of 3,800 steelhead that were marked with the adipose and coda wire tag in 2020. So these fish, a few of them may be returning as skippers this fall, but by and large, you probably won't see those fish contribute a lot yet. So this is the way it's structured when we have people in the PM system collecting data. There are these 3 different areas. And again, if we get hundreds and hundreds of fish coming in with fish in each of these areas being caught and recorded, we'll be able to make some really interesting comparisons about whether or not fish are straying into the main branch of the upper PM, or how many wild fish are showing up in the big South Branch. Maybe that's producing some wild fish. I know I've worked myself in some of these creeks like Ruby Creek and Tank Creek and Cedar Creek, and we did recover a lot of smolts of a variety of species. Coho, Chinook, and steelhead were all being produced, at least when we were working there back in the 90s. So another thing to mention here that might confound things a little bit is that we do have naturally reproducing resident rainbows in the PM system as well. So you see sometimes these 15-inch fish that have more of stream rainbow coloration to them. And this we'll just have to use our best judgment on. Those fish, obviously, they're not going to be marked because they're wild reproduced fish. And we're going to have to rely on anglers to only record what they believe is a steelhead that has spent at least some time in the big lake. And again, at this size, you're probably going to be seeing more of a silver coloration on a skipper that might come back at that size. But again, there's a little room just to add a caveat to interpretation. So I'm not sure if Jim Boss is on the call. I think there are a couple of phone numbers up there. I don't see his name.
I'm on.
Oh, good. So do you want to chime in? You're the team stepped up.
Sure. One thing, the plant at Scottville is not likely to be repeated. Mark told me that was a mistake by the driver. Those fish were supposed to go in the Pentwater. So that shouldn't confound our results going forward. The presentation up to this point, I was, I guess, a little surprised by by your statement that the data set has to be complete or we're going to throw it out. When we initially talked, I'm fine with clip versus non-clip. That's pretty simple. I can keep that straight in my head while I'm on the stream. But getting a length, I fish by myself most of the time, wade most of the time. A lot of times it's winter. So I may catch a fish and I might not get an accurate length on it. And based on your earlier statement, my data isn't going to be any good to you. I don't know if you really are that adamant about it or not, but I think you might stand to lose a lot of data if you're going to throw it out if somebody doesn't get a length on every one of their fish over the next 7 months.
That's a great comment, and I appreciate that. And we do want data coming in, and we may have to adapt things and accept that we won't get full total length data from every one of our volunteers particularly wading fishermen who angle alone for sure. We will have to treat that differently though, right? We won't be able to use that for length frequency breakdowns, and we won't really be able to say anything about the age of those individual fish. But I would say, by all means, if you're collecting at least that adipose fin clip data, the fin clip versus no fin clip on every fish, that's important, that's useful information. There is the issue of the way that the app works. It asks you for a length on every single fish. So that will be something that you'd have to override that. So I guess I'd say put in a ridiculous length. If you have a fish that you have fin clip data for and you don't have the ability to collect length data, max it out. I think we go up to like 52 inches or something on there. Then I'll know for sure it's not a valid length. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's probably safer than trying to make a guess. I mean, most fish I can probably guess within an inch or two most of the time, but I'm not sure that you really want that guesswork in there either.
No, it's a fine line, because I mean, I know I could pretty much tell you how long every smallmouth bass I catch is without putting a ruler to it, but maybe there's a way you can make a couple marks on a rod or something where you can put it next to it, or I don't know if you carry a net, or I've seen net handles with measure.
I don't carry a net. That makes it even harder for those of us. I just beach the fish, and it's probably not there very long.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that I'm going to be able to help you a lot with lengths. I'll get some, but I'm clearly not going to get them all.
Yeah, so I'd say put in a obviously fake length, and I will take that.
So Dan, what you might want to do is recommend, like a nonsense value, like 9.9 or something, or that everybody could use.
Dan, I'll talk to Sue on this and see how long it would take to just put a button in there or an option that just says not measured. So it's clear to everybody.
That would be great. I thought about asking them to do that.
Particularly hard to do. I just got to see what else he's got on his plate.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we go up to 80.75 inches on here. So in doubt, put down 80.75 inches. I'll know that's not a steelhead.
Does it make sense to have like a range in that situation? I don't want to keep going with this, obviously, but
no, that's a great question, because we had that with the Chinooks.
That's why I was thinking a range might make some sense, because it would give you some data that was usable, in terms of kind of zeroing in a little better.
You would have to go into the comments in the GL Angler Diary .org system instead of the Apple device. You could do that, and what I did with the Chinooks was I had those categories of less than 20 inches, 20 to 30 inches, 30 plus inches. The thing is, I didn't create those until after I got the length data and started learning about how old fish were at different lengths based on the data from the state. So we can't really beforehand tell you what length categories are going to be meaningful. So
I did like your idea there to put some marks on your rod, or my beater raters. I might put my Sharpie on my waders and measure a ruler there.
Yeah, Dan, I was going to bring this up too. So I'm actually facilitating a statewide muskie pocket creel. So you know how it is with a muskie, you get them in the boat, they're challenging at first. You don't want to handle them a whole lot, much like our stream fish in the summertime when water temperatures are warm. So in that, I've actually indicated two different columns. I have a measured column and then an approximated column. So what they do, they say, okay, I think it's about 40 inches, and then they'll mark, measured or approximate. And then what you do at the end, you can pull that data out. And if you're summarizing actually measured fish, then, that makes sense. But then at least have another subset of approximated data. So that would be helpful. So at least you're getting something back. But, when you're using your ratio of your clipped and non-clipped fish, that's just going to be worked into the actual ratio and your numbers there. So, which I think you've already figured out. But that's how I've done the pocket creel. I have the measured and then approximate lengths. And I do like the 99 idea. That was exactly what I was thinking. I was kind of waving my hands here, thinking the same thing. Put a 99, and with those who are, obviously with the app, maybe with the instructions or whatever, you include that in there saying, hey, look, it's an approximated length, or I didn't get it at all. I dropped it, whatever, but I caught it. So just put it 99, but it was clipped, for example.
Yeah. So I'll mention too, while we're talking about the app development, the thing is now, if we go through and we have to publish a new app version, it takes a while. It has to get approved by Apple. And once you start entering data, I believe, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you started entering today and a new app version came out next week, it would make it look like that data was gone when you went back into the app. So we were hoping to keep it one version for the whole year. At some point, I don't know if we'll be able to do it soon or if it'll be after the end of this year, but we'll figure out a way to address these kinds of issues. And this is what we want. We want to keep making it better, but we can't make too many changes in too many different times, or else it will affect other things too. So the next river we have up is the Grand, and we'll hear from Brian Gunderman with DNR on that.
Okay, y'all hear me? So, all right. So I don't have any PowerPoint slides, but I can give you an update on where we're at in the Grand right now. The Grand, we don't really have natural reproduction in the main river, but we do have natural reproduction of steelhead in a lot of the smaller tributaries to the Grand River. So we do have to supplement the fishery with stocking, and we do that through stocking directly in the Grand. That all happens up at Lansing. Our annual target is around 23,000 yearling steelhead for the Grand River itself. And then we have an additional a little over 50,000 that are stocked amongst the various tributaries. So those are the Red Cedar, Fish Creek, Prairie Creek, Flat River, Rogue River, and Crockery Creek. So we have several tributaries, from Lansing all the way down to near the mouth that are stocked with steelhead as well. The other big thing for the Grand that we have is that we have 4 fish ladders that the DNR maintains, and then another fish ladder that the city of Lansing maintains. So for us, that's a big time and money investment. Just keeping the logs out of those ladders and making sure everything is working properly. This year, we were able to get some money to have an engineer come in and inspect our ladders at the Weber Dam, Portland Dam, and Grand Ledge Dam. And after those inspections, we made some concrete repairs at Portland and Grand Ledge. So fortunately, our crew was able to do that in-house and save us some money. But we added quite a few years to life expectancy of those ladders with those repairs. So that's the main things we've got going on the Grand. We have had, in the past, we used to monitor fish passage at the Weber Dam. We've got a viewing window there, and we had a camera set up, and we do fish counts at the ladder. We haven't done that in the last couple of years. We've been, we perpetually lost staff. And so that's one of the things that's dropped off is doing those counts. But we do still maintain the ladder so fish can get through. The other thing that's going on in the Grand that's in the news all the time is the Grand Rapids Whitewater Project. So Scott Hanshew was the biologist that covered the Grand. He just retired last Friday. Scott spent a lot of time reviewing proposals for that and commenting on potential impacts to fish. So now we're kind of picking up the pieces and figuring out who's going to cover all of the work that Scott was doing there. But that's another big investment of time for us, just making sure that whatever is done there in Grand Rapids does not negatively impact our fish populations. So I think for the Grand, that's all I have right now.
Thanks, Brian. I see I was muted. We also have Jim Bedford on the call, who has agreed to step up as the team leader. Jim does a lot of writing for Outdoor news outlets and magazines, and also well known as the spinner guru of Lansing and Trout Unlimited leader. So, but I know there's at least one other Grand River angler on, Bob Streck with Grand Rapids Steelheaders. I see you, Bob.
I'm looking forward to getting out. That's all I can say. It looks like a good year coming up.
Yeah, I know people have already been catching some steelhead in the Grand. I've seen a few caught myself, and Jim mentioned that they're catching a few upstream even now. All right, we'll move on to the St. Joe, and Brian Gunderman also is going to chime in from an agency perspective on the St. Joe.
Okay, yeah, before I leave the Grand, I forgot to point out that all of the fish that are stocked in the Grand are all part of one marking group, all the ones from the Grand and those tributaries. So if you turn in a fish and it has from one of those systems, we'll be able to tell that it came from the Grand watershed. We won't be able to tell that it came from Crockery Creek or something like that, but we will be able to positively identify that it came from the Grand system. All right, moving on to the St. Joe. The St. Joe, the stocking situation is a little bit more complicated because we stock two different life stages in the St. Joe. We stock yearlings, and those go in. Some of them go up in Indiana waters. Some of them go right at the state line at Lincoln Park, and other ones go down at Shamrock Park in Berrien Springs. Altogether, I think we have around 75,000 yearlings that are going in annually of the Little Manistee strain. There's some additional fish that India stocks that are Skamania strain, but I won't go into those too much since I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. So the other life stage we stock are those fall fingerlings, and those fish are going in. Again, some of those up at the state line at Lincoln Park, some of them at Shamrock Park in Berrien Springs, and then some of them get stocked into the imprinting pond at the Berrien County Sportsman's Club. So those fish are stocked in the pond in the fall, and then they are released into the St. Joseph River in the spring. So we know how many go into the pond, the number that come out into the St. Joe. We don't have a real accurate count of that. But so right now we have one marking group for the fish that are stocked as yearlings and another marking group for the fish that are stocked as fall fingerlings. So we'll be able to kind of compare survival of those two life stages. The other thing, there's a few other things going on in the St. Joe. Like the Grand, we have fish ladders on the St. Joe. In Michigan, we have 3. We have Berrien Springs, Buchanan, and Niles. And then Indiana has fish ladders at South Bend and Mishawaka. We historically monitored fish passage at Berrien Springs, and if you go far enough back, we did it at Niles as well. Right now, we're not doing that. We ended that in 2017, and to be honest, we have a lot of files from 2011 through 2017 that we still need to sit down and count. So we were falling so far behind on doing all the manual counts on that we decided we're just going to end it, and we'll try to go back and view those older files and at least update the historic data, but we're not going to just keep falling farther behind on that. Indiana is still counting fish at South Bend. They get fewer fish up there, and they've been able to keep track of that better, so keep up to date. One update that we got from them this spring was that we had one of the best spring runs of steelhead that we've had, at least in the last 15 years or so. We had more fish go through just this spring than we've had sometimes in the spring and fall together. So good spring steelhead run on the St. Joe. And at St. Joe, in case you're not aware, at the Berrien Springs Fish Ladder, there's an online webcam. So it's hosted by paddleandpole.com. So if you want to see if there's fish moving through the ladder, trying to plan a fishing trip, that is one way to do it. The other big thing that's going on in St. Joe watershed right now is the Pucker Street Dam removal on the Dowagiac River. Right now, fish can only get up, that dam blocked fish to the only 3 miles of the Dowagiac River. Once that dam is removed, they'll be able to go all the way up to the headwaters, and it's going to reconnect between the main river and tributaries about 159 river miles. So it's been a huge project that we've been looking for years and years. We know that there's a natural reproduction of brown trout in a lot of those tributaries upstream of the dam, and we expect that once steelhead can get through, they'll be naturally reproducing in those tributaries as well. And so far, we've still got a lot of work to go on that dam removal. We're thinking right now, maybe next June, they'll be pretty much wrapped up with, other than maybe a little bit of cleanup. It all depends on how everything goes, but they're going to work right through the winter and try to get things done as quickly as possible. Our DNR crew, as coupled with Pokagon band of Potawatomi Indians, and is doing sediment monitoring below the dam just to make sure we're not getting a huge sediment release. So we've got a couple of transects that we monitor. We were doing it on a weekly basis. Now that we're past the big drawdown, we're doing it on a monthly basis. So far so good on that. There's some sediment going down, but not anywhere near the threshold where we've got to make major actions. Other than that, yeah, that's the big thing that's going on right now. That's been in the news. It's going to continue to be a huge priority for us over the next year here. So that's all I've got for the St. Joe.
Thanks, Brian. And we have Jay Anglin joining us as the team leader for the St. Joe.
Howdy. Would you like me to elaborate on my take on the Dowagiac?
Yeah, sure. Just chime in on what you think of the fishery and, natural reproduction, dam removal.
So I've been guiding on the Dowagiac for, this will be my 24th year, believe it or not. So I've seen it go through all the different phases from when the gates were opened on the dam and the impoundment drained into the lower river. I've watched it heal itself, and then as sand built up above the dam again after that sand trap was emptied out many years ago, it just started to get worse and worse. And so I've always wanted this dam to come out. I have a bio degree from Northern Michigan University, so I've always been sort of engaged with conservation and things like that. But as a guide, it's obviously going to hurt. But for me, that's a non-issue. I know some other guides are a little upset about it, but for me, it's going to be awesome. Anecdotally, there's a ton of natural reproduction on the Dowagiac, the lower river, which is, again, so short. The prime areas are so small that, it's kind of remarkable how much there is. So I suspect, as Brian alluded to, that, the upper river is just going to be a powerhouse in terms of natural reproduction. Obviously the biggest issue we'll have on that system is always going to be recruitment because of the dams and the fact that it's a pretty prolific warm water fishery as well. So predation will be high on juvenile fish, but I'm really looking forward to it. I floated the Dowagiac last Friday. I actually took my first trip down the Dowagiac since April. It was a little dirty. Again, it's not nearly as bad. I've always been saying it wasn't going to be that bad. It's actually better off than I even anticipated. So we're really looking forward to this study. I'll spend a lot of time on the St. Joe. I have been all summer, and I will transition into steelhead and salmon, of course, here. But really looking forward to tackling the St. Joe a little more than I usually do. And there's some really great anglers, very conservation-minded anglers that will be able to engage with this particular endeavor. And I think that's going to be really good because these are guys I trust, and they're good sticks, man. They catch a lot of fish and they have a good eye. So we'll get that going, and hopefully we get some good data for you guys.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. It's great to have you joining us. And I know we're a little over time now. Some people might have to run. Hopefully you can stick around for a few minutes because we've only got a couple of teams left, and then a quick wrap up. So next, we're going to move to Lake Superior tributaries, and Corey Kovacs is our DNR lead on that.
Sure thing. Yeah, Corey Kovacs, fisheries biologist. I work out of the Newberry office. I manage the eastern half of the Lake Superior Management Unit, which is including, like the Two-Hearted River on the east end here. And I'm going to cover all the coastal streams here in a couple of slides. So real brief overview, steelhead stock in Lake Superior. We've been doing it nearly 100 years. It has been a pretty phenomenal fishery at times, relatively controversial at times as well over that span of 100 years. But where we are today in the rivers that receive fish, we have a lot of excellent fisheries. We're building things in the late fall season, in the early winter, all the way out into about early June. Our run typically falls after the Huron and Michigan run, and we have a lot of success in our local streams. So here is a spatial distribution of our stocking locations for our yearling steelhead in Lake Superior. And it spans all the way from Black River Harbor over to the Two-Hearted River is our farthest east. And again, these are the locations of our yearling stocking sites. We have Black River Harbor, the East Branch Ontonagon River, the Falls River, East Branch Huron River, the Carp River, and the Two-Hearted River. So I put together a real quick summary of stocking detail here. Starting with the Black River Harbor, this is really an open water stocking. It gets 15,000 fish requested annually for yearlings. It is also a site of fall fingerlings. However, fall fingerlings have not been stocked there since before 2016. And it is just an opportunity for when we have those additional fall fingerling steelhead or those surplus steelhead that come out during the culling process in the hatchery. Natural reproduction there is unknown, specific to the Black River Harbor. We know some adjacent streams as far east as the Fire Steel and some of the other smaller streams that come off of that western slope of the Keweenaw. We know that these fish likely feed those populations and supplement that, but the natural reproduction is unknown, specifically the Black River Harbor, but we know the other streams do provide some natural reproduction from that. So the anglers, when they're out open water fishing, they should suspect to see some of these clip fish floating around just because of the expected low amount of natural reproduction. So we should be seeing some clip fish. Also advise on the west end of the UP, we do have some straying fish from Minnesota. They have experience with some of the Kamloops strains, which also had the Atticos clip. Now we've worked with them on their elimination of that, as well as some of their anglers part of their steelhead project that they have going. So they have since ceased stocking Kamloops, and those Kamloops are no longer being used. So we likely will not be seeing any of those in the system here in the next year or two. So expect some of the open water steelhead that you see that are clipped on the west end to still be likely some Kamloops. The East Branch Ontonagon River, so this stocking location is way up near Kenton. It's very popular. It's a national forest property. We know there's natural reproduction there, and the yearling stocking has been moved around and bumped around a couple different locations, but it's stocked near Kenton, and the natural reproduction does feed that system. We do believe that some of those fish stay resident to that system, so that's something that we have continued to work with our partners in the Ottawa National Forest to understand more, but we do also know that these fish migrate all the way out to Lake Superior, and we're talking a very long distance, over 70 miles. Falls River, located in Baraga County, which is right in the town of Lance. We stock 15,000 fish annually. That is a yearling plan. That's also a location for some of our fall fingerlings. However, the fall fingerlings have not been stocked there since before 2018, when the Atticos clip yearlings here statewide have hit the scene. Natural reproduction in that river is unknown. We know that there's likely some, but it is not documented by any of our research or our studies that we have for monitoring and tracking. That water there isn't a lot of groundwater input. There is some in the very near headwaters. However, as you get further down, it is relatively warm, and we do know that brown trout do use that system as well. The East Branch Huron River is a little bit more popular. It's in northeastern Baraga County, very close to the Huron Mountain Club. And it gets 17,000 fish annually, yearling. A very, very good run. Access in the springtime can be very challenging there, just due to the snow load coming off of Lake Superior. And you can likely be stream fishing there Memorial Weekend with snow in the woods. So a lot of anglers are familiar with photos in the background holding a steelhead with probably 2 or 3 feet still in the woods up behind them. Natural reproduction, absolutely. It's a contributor to Lake Superior, the fishery there. So we do see some wild fish moving out of that system, as well as the other branches of the Huron and some of the smaller tribs. The Carp River, right in Marquette, as you make that curve out of Harvey, You will see anglers fishing right at the river mouth. It gets stocked 13,000 fish annually. It's yearlings. And it's also one of our annual locations for fall fingerlings when we have those steelhead available in the fall from our surplus and our culling process. Natural reproduction, relatively limited there. We have a lot of brook trout in the upper system. We do know that there's some mixing up there in some of the tributaries, but it is likely very low for natural reproduction for our steelhead, just mainly due to the substrate types that are in that area. Now, the 200 River is in my backyard. This is one that is probably the longest standing history for our steelhead stocking. My records show in the file as far back as 1935. We began steelhead stocking in the 200 River. Those fish actually get stocked at the Reed and Green Bridge. So we have a type 4 stream open year round from the High Bridge all the way down to the river mouth. And this is very popular starting as early as heck next week. You'll see folks up there starting to chase steelhead. It's a very early run for them, obviously, but the heaviest run is from that middle of March to middle of April timeframe, and you will get them all the way out to about the June 1st timeframe. The annual stock request is 9,000 fish. That's been bounced around a little bit up to like 9,600 to 10,000, but it's held since I've been around 9,000. And we do have natural reproduction there. It is believed and argued, and it could be argued that fish may not even need to be stocked there. However, they do feed and likely supplement the adjacent streams, such as the Sucker River and the Little Two-Hearted River, with what we stock in the Two-Hearted River. So very popular fishery. Access, however, in the springtime is very challenging. Again, the snow load in that country, none of those roads are plowed. I have a lot of anglers calling me in the springtime asking me when they're going to plow the roads. And the best access there is primarily on snowmobiles, side-by-sides with tracks if you can get up through that area. And additionally, I wanted to highlight the Anna River in Munising. So that is one of our annual stockings for fall fingerling steelhead. It's relatively close to Thompson State Fish Hatchery, which is where our yearlings come from. It's a supplemental stocking really for that fishery in Munising Bay. After Jim Peck studied that we learned in the 1980s and early 90s, we knew that those fall fingerlings weren't going to contribute a whole lot to the Lake Superior fishery. However, we do have that opportunity there for Munising to bump it up in the creel for their catch rates just slightly. Some other streams I wanted to highlight. These are popular in Lake Superior. So if you are participating in this program, as Dan mentioned, you couldn't list every single stream, but these are some of the ones that are highlighted. So if you do select, Chalkley River, a lot of activity there near population center, Marquette. We have fisheries all the way up into the Silver Leg Creek there. So a lot of pressure, but just a reminder that those streams that I indicated are our stocking locations are not the only ones that have a productive steelhead fishery in the springtime. Many of these do not have that fall run like the Two-Hearted River, but all of these will see that run in the springtime. And we do have some others out there, but the traffic on those would be very minor. So if you have any questions or would like more information on the fisheries up here, you're welcome to contact me. This is my information. Obviously, it's available on our website. You can contact Heather or anyone else. We're excited about this program as well. I know I spoke to Dan about a little over a year and a half ago. We sat at a meeting and he just asked me, do we have any interest in Lake Superior? And I said, yes, we do. So I know we have interested anglers, and I'm looking forward to the participation that we hopefully can get. And I know that Roger Greil, who is working in our ARL, our Aquatic Research Lab at Lake State University, doing our Atlantic salmon. He was on the call, Dan, however, he had to drop due to another priority here. So, but he is going to be our streams leader for our team leader for our streams on Lake Superior.
Thanks, Corey. I got that message from him. So he'll be a great partner to have as we move forward. And I'll say, before we go on to the next couple of teams here that aren't quite fleshed out, this was kind of a field of dreams thing. If we build it, they will come, we hope. And, I never would have been able to reach out to people on the Lake Superior watershed if it wasn't for Corey. So part of this, what we're doing is we're just gonna put it out there and see who jumps on. And I did talk to some Lake Huron biologists over the last couple weeks. None of them are available today, and we don't really have a team fleshed out. I don't know if we're going to have like an Ossabaw River team or an Aqueduct team or both, or just one Lake Huron team, but that's still in the works. And same thing goes for the Manistee and Muskegon River. We don't really have team leaders located yet. Those are obviously two really big, important fisheries that probably produce a lot of natural fish. Mark Tonello is very interested in being our agency partner, but we're still looking for team leaders. So if you know someone, please shop it around, folks on the Manistee and Muskegon. And then we also got a lot of interest when I put this up on Michigan Sportsman Forum, really being a West Michigan guy. My district for Sea Grant covers from Ludington down to the St. Joe area. So that's my responsibility. And I don't do much at all with Superior or Erie streams, but when I put it up on Michigan Sportsman Forum and the Northwest Rivers Forum, I got a lot of interest from folks in the Lake Erie drainage saying, why don't we have some of those rivers? And I said, hey, we do. They're in the app. We do have the Huron River there, and we have Aiden on the call, Aiden Tomashik, I believe. Hopefully I get your name pronunciation right.
How you doing, Daniel? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Hope you can hear me well.
Mm-hmm.
Start a little bit off about the Huron. We have about 25 miles of fishable river. We have one ladder located, and that's in the city of Flat Rock. Most of the fishing's done below there. And I wanted to make sure it was included. I know this is mainly, a lot of this is focused on, West Side streams. But I fish, places all over the state, Grand River, Manistee, and a lot of people don't even know that the river even exists or that it holds a stable population of steelhead. And a little bit about that, we probably believe it's been kind of thought to local anglers that there's probably not too much natural reproduction on the river. The river gets pretty warm in the summer, and there's only about 2 or 3 feeder creeks above the ladder that could probably sustain a population, but the fish do get up there, and I have seen them on, making beds and on beds in those creeks. And I'd probably say 70% of our fish are stocked fish, and, obviously Lake Erie is connected to Ohio and Pennsylvania and Ontario. So, but we do see wild fish caught. So if they're coming out of the Huron, there hasn't really been any studies done on it if they are natural reproduction out of there, if they could be possibly natural reproduction from a stream in Ontario, a stream in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or somewhere like that. But we receive pretty heavy stocking, spring yearlings. I think we receive like 50 to 60,000 every spring. And they've been good with keeping up with the stocking program. But, I'm hoping this kind of will give us a little bit of research about, the natural fish returning. And if they are natural, are they spawning in that river, or are they coming from other places where they are spawning naturally? I'd probably include in here maybe if there is a entry, I don't know if there is, for the Clinton River, that's a little bit north of, or a little bit northeast of Detroit. But that's, drains in the Lake St. Clair. But they also have, a solid population of steelhead that come in every spring, or this fall and spring. And they have a lot of resident trout there, resident rainbows. They'll have resident browns far upstream there. And I just, it's a unique fishery, being, only 20 minutes outside of the biggest city in the state. It almost seems unlikely that the fish would be there, but there is a very, we seem to collect a pretty healthy population from the river. So I'm interested to see, through this. I know I have 2 buddies that are going to sign up for the app and are willing to, contribute. And pretty much all of it's local fishermen. There's no guides on the river. But I'm hoping, we can figure something out about, natural fish. Are they spawning in the river, and are they surviving, or are they coming from other places? And, it'd be something interesting to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the app, sometimes it takes a while to implement, and we put all the changes in at once. But I did not realize the Clinton holds a resident trout, so that would be an obvious candidate too for some natural reproduction. And
yeah, I believe upstream, above, there's a small little dam in what's the name of Utica, near Yates Cider Mill. But I believe upstream from there, there's been a lot of brown trout caught, and I don't know. I think they might stock them, but I'm sure there is naturally reproduction fish in there, especially when you get real far up in the system. But yeah, they definitely hold resident fish, and way far up in the Huron, I know there is resident trout, at least rainbow trout. But sadly, there's a lot of dams in the way. There's I think there's 130 miles of river there until you get to the swamps that drain in. But there's only one ladder, and then once they get up to Belleville, they're stuck at a dam there, and then there's 2 more dams upriver from there, big old power dams. But they provide the lakes that everyone lives on up there, so they're not going to go away.
Well, thanks for joining us, and I know we're a little over time here. I just got one more quick wrap up slide to share. Next steps for everyone. First thing is, we had about 40 people max on this call, spread out all over the state, and a lot of agency partners. We really need to share the online resources and get people signed up at this point to make sure we have enough people contributing data to be useful. That's the main goal now for everyone. And if you can, promote it at club meetings and written articles on Facebook, whatnot, any way you can. Our next step will be to try to meet again sometime in the middle of the season. I was thinking originally mid-December, but February might be a better chance to really split the season in 2 with it 4 months before and 4 months after. And as we go on, I think we'll keep this conversation going and get reports from every different team that we have built. Hopefully we'll build some more teams by then as we work to refine them, and we'll develop some more educational and marketing materials like that fin clip article I put out. If there's something really specific that you want to see or something that would help a broad audience get more engaged, we'll be thinking about those things constantly. And we'll probably try to work in a couple more technical presentations in later meetings. We mentioned the otolith microchemistry study, so we already have some really good information on that for Lake Michigan. And there are studies going back years, like Heather mentioned the previous study on the Betsy River. We could certainly get a lot more in depth with that. And as this goes on, we may eventually have big stream teams have their own meetings in the future. But for now, we'll try to do this. Looks like we're about split between mid-December and early February. So we'll make that call later, and we'll certainly let you all know when that is. Since you signed up here, we've got your contact info. And we are over time, so thank you for hanging in there. But otherwise, we're all set, and it's been great. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully this will be a big success.